To change that, we are going to create some constraints between the grains. And the constraints that come in mind is glue constraints. So let's use vellum glue here. Let's plug that right there. So just, after we move the point to the origin and after we moved the constraint to the origin, and then we want to glue them. All right, so let's move everything down to keep it clean as always. Just a line. I like to keep my network clean, so it's much easier to work. And also a quick tip, but I'm sure you already know that, but start working with something that is light and fast to iterate, because you will be able to narrow down your look so much faster. And then, you can dive in, adding more grains, a smaller p scale, and so on and so forth. So now that we have our glue parameter here, our glue constraints, let's set it up. So here, the group type is primitive. Let's set that to point. Okay. Now we can see, can I show you the constraints? Okay, now we can see our set of constraints. So before the glue, this is what it looked like. Only the points, no connection between the points, nothing. Now with glue, we start to see some primitives there. And those primitives represent the glue constraint between two or more points. So we can see that we have some constraint between those 2 points, etc., etc. But we want to set them up a bit differently. So first of all, about the max search distance, it's like, okay, how far should I look for a point? If I increase that, you don't see much because I only have 1 constraint per point. Let's say I have 3 constraints per point. Let's reduce. Okay, so if my max search distance is smaller than the radius, or let's say diameter of one of my grain particle, it will not find any neighbor. It will be like, oh, they are too far away, I cannot find them. If it's higher, though, it might, well, if it's too high, it might find a neighbor over there, which is not really what we want. We want each grain to find, the closest neighbor that you have. Here you have some search preference that are set to nearest, etc., etc. But I like to play it safe and copy my particle size here. And let's say I want it to be my particle size times 1.6, let's say. So it will look a bit further, always. And you won't have to change this value every time you change your grain size, because it will be linked, which is great for us. So now we want to say, okay, how many points are you going to look for? Let's say 30. You want the nearest, how many constraints per point? Or maybe, yeah, let's say 30. So these are the options that you are going to change at will based on the behavior of your simulation. Like having less constraint per points will make something that is a bit softer. More constraint per points will have something that is more rigid, but heavier because you have more constraints, so you have to play with those settings. But we'll dive into that later on once everything is set up a bit better. In terms of stiffness, I like to have that the maximum possible. So let's say 10,000 plus 1 explosion 10. All right, and we want to have a break threshold as well. Not yet. Let me show you what we have achieved so far. So now all our grains are constrained with a glue constraint. They are looking up to 30 neighbors. So let's see how that changes the behavior of our simulation. So hitting play. And now you can see that the grains are behaving as a whole, as a group. It's flexible. It behaves like a cloth. So we are not yet achieving the result that we're after. But it's already something. It's no longer looking like sand. It's looking like a weird cloth moving. we are improving it. It's fine. So in order for this to not behave like a cloth that we cannot break, basically, we need to say, okay, if the force applied to you as a constraint are too big, you're able to break, you're able to let go. So it's right there in the breaking tab. We can have different type of breaking. We can have stretch stress, stretch distance, or stretch ratio. Feel free to look into the difference between these. I'm not going to dive too much into that. Let's just say that the stretch stress, sorry, it's hard to say, is the one what you are after. Let's have that, let's leave it at the default of 0.1 for now. Let's go back to our simulation and hit play. And you see that already we have some that are starting to break, not all of them. And there it's breaking, you know, and we're back to the behavior we used to have at the beginning because our breaking threshold is a bit too low. If I can show you what is happening under the hood. So these are our initial constraints, and you can see them breaking until we don't have much of them. So back to our original behavior. Now, if I do the same thing, but with break threshold of 10, let's say, and I hit play here, so I'm displaying the constraint, just so it's clear for you guys. Now we can see that it's still breaking, but less, you know, it's breaking where there are some stress and some stretch. So there's that. And what does it look like? It looks like this, which is not very much ice-like for now, but, you know, still we are getting there, you know, we are starting to see some fracture happening. So yay, hooray to us. Now, the idea behind all that is I want the grain to almost never break. I want them to be solid, to act as rigid bodies. So I want my break threshold to be huge. Let's say 10,000. And you will see later on why it's important to have a huge number on the thing I'm going to have you set up. So with a breaking threshold of 10,000, it's unlikely that the grains are going to break. Sure, it will still happen from time to time, here and there, if the forces are too high, which is good, which is what we want. But right now, it's not happening. It's great. We still have the breaking that is enabled, but the constraints are so strong that it will not break, you know. So it very much looked like what we had before the breaking was enabled. Now that we have that, we want to weaken the constraints, but only in specific areas to create our shapes, to create our different pieces of ice. And that's what we are going to do right now. So we are going to branch out from our island. So I want to say that this here, let's create a null, is our island, or, you know, ice patch, whatever you want to call that. But my lack of vocabulary makes me call that an island. Bear with me here. From this, I want to start fracturing and create, you know, pieces network, a network of pieces. So I'm going to drop a bound here. Well, actually, let's drop a bound right up there. No. So now we have a full bounding box, sorry, of our grains. From there, we are going to scatter some points. Right, so rather than forcing the total count of my points, I want to use a density scale. That way, you know, if I go back, once everything is set up, if I go back and change the size of my island or add multiple islands or whatever, you know, like, rather than needing to change the amount of points to match the new scale of my new island, you know, the density will always be respected. You know, there will be only so much points per square meter, or so on and so forth. So, how to say, if I'm not clear, Yeah, I hope I'm clear about, about that. But it's like, if I were to have something different, like this grid here, oh, that's crazy. I shouldn't have done that. Yeah, no. Let's go back to what it should be. But if I were to, let's say, draw another curve here. Let's draw another curve. Let's say a new island that is like much bigger. Yeah, like this, okay? Now I would have the same density of points for my pieces, but only on a much larger area. So you understand why it's important to use the density scale rather than the total count, because here I have 1,000 points and here I have 1,000 points, so I have much higher density here, which is what we don't want. So here I'm going to have a fairly low density because we just want to create like big pieces. So let's have 0.5, 0.7. Yeah, let's start with that for now. So we have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 points. Yes, we have 5 points. And now we can use the Voronoi fracture node, which is fairly simple. We just plug the geometry here, we just plug the point here, and now we have our first island that start to appear. Yay, hooray! With that done, what we want to do, let's discuss a bit about what we want to do with that. I have now different different pieces. All right. So if I drop an exploded view, exploded view here, we have those different pieces right there. Okay. We would like our grains to be very strong inside this piece, but the constraint, the glue constraint between our grain, we want it to be very, very weak between those two pieces in the grain, right? So let's do that slowly. First, I want to drop a for each connected primitive. So it's going to use a connectivity node to understand, the 3D connectivity of each of these pieces and be like, okay, oh, you have 5 pieces, which is what we want. We have 5.5 pieces. Now for each of these pieces, okay, let me make sure everything is set up properly. Actually, I don't really like having that here. Oh well, all right, no, we'll keep using that. Let me make sure everything is set up properly here. Okay. So for each of these pieces, I want to group them. Doesn't make any sense what I'm saying, sorry. I want to group, group every point that is inside this specific piece. So what I want to do here is drop in a group, group here, and I want to say, no, actually, I want to group my points that are here. I want the bounding region of the group to be an object, bounding object, and I want the group type to be on the points right there. Okay, now we can see that we have like 10,000 points in this group, which is called group 1. I'm sure you can agree that group 1 is not very pleasing, so let's call that in rather than group 1. All right, and we want to drop a blast node. And we want to say, hey, please remove everything that is not in my group. So there we have it. Actually, we can see that it brings an issue here because, yeah, that's what I feared. Since I'm having a bound here, like it's not selecting the points that are on the top and on the bottom. So what we just need to do is to increase our lower and upper padding in the z-axis. Actually, let's make sure we are not grabbing those points as well. So let's increase our padding everywhere, actually. So let's have 0.1 will be enough, I guess. And the smaller our grains, the less we'll have to increase our padding. Now, if I reevaluate that, now we have all our grains that are selected, which is much better. Okay, cool. So now we'd like to have some kind of attributes on this group of points to say, hey, you belong to that specific piece. So an easy way to do that would be to attribute promote, my class here that I've been created, which is now on the primitive. So I'm going to grab my class, sorry, it's on the primitive, so I'm going to grab my class, I'm going to promote it to my points. So now I do have the class attribute that is stored on my points. Now I'm simply going to transfer this attribute, transfer. I'm simply going to transfer this attribute to my points so they are properly named. So condition, I'm going to increase that a lot. So now we do have a class attribute. And now if I run that on all my pieces, I should have like a class attribute. If I go to my points, I have class going from 0 to 4. And I can drop, just for the sake of it, color node, say random from attribute. And if I say class, you can see our different pieces, which is great. We are successful so far. Well done. One last thing I want to do, because I don't really like to have class 0, is to add 1 to my class attribute. So I'm going to drop attribute adjust, I guess. Attribute adjust, it's an integer, so I'm going to do that. Sorry. I'm going to say attribute name should be class, primitive class, please. And I want to add 1 to it. So now my class should go from 1 to 5. And now same here, it should go from 1 to 5. Perfect. It doesn't change anything. It's just, for me, it's easier in a way. So now that I have a class attribute on my points, I'd like to have this class attribute on my constraints. And from there, I can tell my constraints, hey, look, if you have a different class attribute on one side and another side, it means that you as a constraint are between two big pieces. So you should be weak. All right, so let's do that. Let's grab our constraint network, which is here. All right, and do an attribute transfer on it. So I want to transfer my class attribute that is on my point, to my primitives right there. Okay, so I'm going to go here. Hold on. Yep, my bad, sorry. Shift R, inverting that. Yeah. I want to transfer my class attribute to my primitives. And now my primitive do have, well, the points of my primitive do have a class attribute. Great. Now we want to promote this class attribute to to the primitive. But to do that, we'll do something first. We want to compare this class value on each side of the constraints, right? To do that, I want to promote my class attribute to my primitive. Okay, so from my point to my primitive, and there are 2 points per primitive. And I want to say, okay, I need to compare your maximum values and your minimum value. So I'm going to change the new name here. I'm going to call that class max, all right? Because I'm asking to get the maximum value that it finds on those points. So class max, all right? Oh, it's fine, it's fine. And then I want to do the same thing here. I want to promote it as class min, right? So now if I go into my primitive here, I should see, and I'm not seeing it, all right, because primitive please and primitive please, all right, Thank you. So now I should see class max and class min, you know? So when those two are similar, once again, it means that the constraints is inside the cluster. If they are different, can I get an example where they are different? No, not really. Maybe. No. Well, we'll definitely have some that are different, and we'll see that soon enough. Let's drop a primitive vop. Because I don't really like to do some Python solvex. You know, this is not really who am I. I'd rather work in VOP. Sorry about that. So we are going to fetch our class max and class min values. So class max here, and alt click to duplicate, and class min right there. I want to compare. No, not complement, compare, please. I want to compare those values. Let me maybe, yeah, we don't need all of that real estate. Okay, so let's compare those. So comparing. Let's say, yeah, if you're equal. So if you're equal, you will say, let's bind export, sorry. Bind export, and let's call that how do we want to call that? We're going to call that link. Okay, for now. So now I should have an attribute called link, and okay, it's the same everywhere, which it shouldn't be. At some point we should have primitive that are, you know, like in between groups. So what's wrong in what we've done? Let's go back there. Let's see if our attribute transfer works. Yes, we do have a different class. So here, change new name, of course, and there it should be minimum. My bad. So now class min is equal to the minimum. And going back here, yes, perfect. Now we do have some linked values. So let's try to say link. That's not working because my link is a float and I'm on the primitive there. So I should color my primitives. There, perfect. So now we can see that all the constraints finally that are inside a cluster piece are one color, and all the constraints that are in between are another color, which is exactly what we want, and that's the base of our FX there. So let's move on from there. Okay, and now that we have that, let's keep that as a display. I need to use this link value here to multiply our break threshold that is here. See, the threshold, which is called break threshold, that's the name of the attribute, and we want to use this value here to multiply it. So let's do that. Let's drop an attribute copy right there on my constraints. See, I'm grabbing my constraint, doing my thing, but I just want to copy on, you know, the clean thing without any operation on that. So I want to copy my attribute, which is called link, right there, to my primitives, right there. So now we are here. I do have an attribute copy that is called link, and I'm going to create a primitive VOP right there. So primitive VOP, and let's not call that link, you know, these are our big pieces. Okay, so those are the biggest one. We are going to have big pieces, so let's call that big. Okay, so now it's called big. Let's make sure that this is updated. Big, perfect. And now let's call that big. Much better. Okay, So now in our primitive verb, I want to say, okay, let's grab my break threshold attribute. Break threshold, okay, and let's export it. By export, let's copy that. Oof. And let's paste it there. Okay, so far I'm doing nothing to my break threshold. You can see here it's set at 10,000 all throughout. Now I want to import my big value. So, big. All right. I believe it's an integer, so let's transform it so it's a float. So integer to float. Perfect. Now it's a float. And actually, you know, it's a float between 0 and 1, but I want it to be between 0 and 10,000 because our maximum value in our break threshold is 10,000. So let's drop a fit range and say from 0 to 1 is equal to 0 to 10,000. Oops, 10,000. Okay. So now big is 10,000 or 0, perfect. Our break threshold is 10,000 or 10,000. That's exactly what we want, and you will see the magic happening very soon. So now we want to say, hey, break threshold, if you see that big as a value that is smaller than you, then you should grab the value of big, okay? So now if I duplicate that, and put it on my constraints that are fed into my simulation, and I say a ramp from attributes. I'm going to say break threshold. Hold on. I made break. Break threshold should be break threshold. Okay. Now making sure break threshold are perfect. Sorry about that. So now I'm going back to my color, saying, okay, my break threshold is between 0 and 10,000. Actually, you know, we can copy directly this value here. Copy parameter, past relative reference. And now we can see that those here are at 0, finally. Let me make everything cleaner, and we'll go over what we've just made once again. Sorry, so let's do that. Let's clean this up, clean this up, clean this up. Okay, so what we are doing is we are grabbing our points, grouping them per each pieces, right there, okay, doing the group, then having a class attribute on those points only. Sorry, going back here. Then this class attribute, we use it to compare if a constraint is in between two pieces or inside a single piece. If it's in between two pieces, we use that to multiply the break threshold. So let's say set break threshold. We use that to set our break threshold to the lowest possible. So now if I go into our network and hit play, we should see the fracture is happening, which is great, which is exactly what we want. Now we can see that there are some issues. Why is this piece flying away like that? It's not really what we want. So this is an issue that we are going to dive into a bit later on, but you can see that we are not out of the woods yet. Okay. So cleaning this up, we will want to do the same thing for different size of pieces, right? So now we have our big pieces. Okay, let's do the same thing, but for medium pieces. So medium pieces, there should be more of them. So let's increase, change the seed. Let's increase the density. So now we have more pieces right there. Okay. It's going to do exactly the same thing. So fracturing, you know, like for every single pieces, grouping, doing everything that we've already said, class. And now instead of calling that big, let's call that medium. All right. We are going to, I'm going to move everything down now. Okay. We are going to go there. Okay. It's going to start to be a bit messy. So, tac. All right. A bit cleaner. Okay. So now we want to attribute copy our medium attribute. Oof. So medium. All right. And we want to do exactly the same thing as we've done previously. So copy that, call that medium, and say, hey, if you find something that is smaller, you should go with the smaller value. And now displaying that, bam, we have more pieces. Going back into our grained up, hitting play, and yep, that's doing the thing we wanted to do. Well, some of the issues are gone, but now you get the idea. I'm going to do that a third time. Right there. A third time. This time we're going to call that small. That's great. And we are going to, of course, make sure that we have many more pieces. So that's small. That's cool. Yeah, all right, let's go with that. Same thing. Let's transfer those attributes. Why I'm transferring this is because I like to do, like my messy operation on one side. I could very much, here have an object merge, which might be what I'm doing, and then having, my clean network there. That's visually, I prefer that. So let's call that small. Okay, small, and it should go and grab the small ones here. Once again, same thing, duplicate, call that small, and say, hey, please grab the minimum value. Let's just see, that's exactly what we want to do. Oh yeah, no, that's normal. That's exactly what we want. Okay, so cleaning time. You can hit Control B to put that in full screen. Well, it's pretty much clean. You could trap an object merge. You could fetch the geo, but I'm sure it's fine with you. Okay, doing that. I just want to make sure you understand what is happening where. This is our simulation network. What we are feeding out of network. This is the operation we want to do, the way we split the constraints, and everything is happening right there inside of this one. So that's exactly what we want. All right. Now, the name of the game is to set up the different level of forces needed to fracture, to break a constraint. Right now, everything is set to 0. You can see everything is like everything that is black. It's like there is no constraint. It's breaking straight away. It's not putting any resistance. Like if I show you with the tiny pieces, with the small pieces in place, it's just like there are no constraints between that. There's nothing holding them together. It doesn't make sense. So we want to establish a network. We want to establish values that would say, hey, this gap is weaker than this gap, and that gap is weaker than this gap. So let me illustrate that. I think it will be better than just me trying to explain that. So all right, so right now, when the break threshold finds that big is at 0, is going to put it at 0, medium is at 0, is going to put it at 0, small is at 0, is going to put it at 0. Let's say we want the small pieces to fracture to get fracture, but with when more force is required. So let's actually clamp my small value here. So I want to say the maximum is like 10,000, no issue with that. But let's say I want the minimum to be, let's say 100, or let's say 1,000, because of this. You can see that when I rise the minimum, those start to become clearer because, just as a reminder, we are displaying this and we are saying, okay, show me a range between 0 and 10,000, 10,000 being white and 0 being black. You can see, like, oh, what's happening there. So let's say, okay, I want my small piece to fracture when the break threshold is at 500, let's say. Let's do the same for the medium. Let's say, okay, I want the medium, get out of here. I want the medium to break when the threshold is at 100. And let's say I want the big to break when the threshold is at 0. So let's just duplicate that. Just say 0. So there won't be any change, but at least we have a control on that. Okay. Can I? Yeah, a bit better for you to understand. Oof. Path and beef. All right. Let's go back to our network and see what this has changed for us. So going back, before everything was fracturing straight away. Now we can see that the big pieces are the ones that fracture first, and we're expecting to see some fracture, but it's not happening. So clearly, our thresholds are way too high. So let's do 10. Let's do 50 for now. Like just trying to showcase what this setup is doing right now. So we have the big fracture, and then we can see some of the smaller fracture because there are more force that is being applied, and everything is fracturing. Now we can see the small pieces fracturing because there are more force. So it's working, like it's trickling down, going from big to medium to small based on how much force, how much pressure is applied to that. But I'm sure your keen eye was able to see that even though the constraints are working, like what the simulation is doing is it's not really great. Like it's not the best, right? Yeah, we can agree with that. Let's see just a little bit more. So I'm sure we need to change some simulation settings there at some point, and I guess we'll do that right now. Let's look at our solver. What is our solver doing? So there you can see that like we have like all those parameters, how many substep, how many constraint iteration. I'm not going to dive too much into that, but of course it's always great to learn what it does. But I'm going to just gloss over the only settings we need to change for this to work better. So first thing for me is the friction. So the friction with the grain, you have to keep in mind that this is ice, and it's ice that is supposed to be on water. So it should be free of its own motion. But when the ice is resting on itself, it should have friction. Like ice on water, no friction. Ice on itself, it should it should stop. It shouldn't keep going. So let's modify our friction. So static threshold, let's put that let's say 0.1, but dynamic scale, let's put it to 1 for this. And then you see external friction, a scale factor and amount of friction effect to apply on a collision with external geometry. So external geometry will be the boat and will be like the ground plane. And on both those objects, we don't want much friction. So let's put it at 0.1. Let's see if that has changed the behavior of our simulation. I should have done a flipbook, but we see that some stuff has changed. The way it moves. Like it's a bit better. We are not quite there yet. There are some issues. Why are those pieces detaching? Why does this keep going? Let's have a top view. You see that they are being pushed very far away, they are not stopping, you know, like this is kind of breaking our scale. So we need to start dialing this a little bit more. I want to have a pop drag here that will affect the points. Let's leave it at 1 for now, and let's see what it does. Now I can see that my pieces are not moving that far away. You know, they really need to be pushed by the boat to move, which is great. You know, it adds scale. You know, like the more drag you have, the more scale it will get. You know, otherwise, you know, a piece is flying all the way where you don't want it to be flying. So that's cool. That's what we want. You know, like this is already looking much better. Okay, that's great. Actually, let's make a flip book of this one. All right, so I'm going to create a camera. So Control click. All right, okay, that will be our witness camera for now. Okay, so that we will always have the same angle. Let's disable the boat, go back here, and create a new flip book here. Let's go. Okay, so let's review that. Well, everything is doing okay. I was hoping to get an issue, but I cannot really showcase it right now. But okay, let's you see this little piece here. It can happen sometime that when you have like a small piece like that of grains that are constrained together, it can happen that this piece starts to fly away. Why? Because it's trying to average between all the constraints that it's getting, and it's not managing to do that well, and it creates, you know, forces that are pushing the piece in a hectic way. There are ways to fix that, and you know, maybe you already encountered it. But let's go into grain and collision. It's there. You know, like constraint averaging shouldn't be on. And I want to limit the displacement and collision. So that way I don't give too much impact on the ice. Let's see the difference that what we've just done makes. Maybe not a lot, maybe a huge difference. And my flipbook just crashed, but you will have to, well, no, let me regenerate it. So I'm going to redo the flipbook without limiting displacement on collision. All right, so this flipbook here, let me show you Windows sequence list. All right, the first one, and okay, all right, never mind. I won't be able to show you that, but yes, I will show you live. You know what? Okay. So if I don't take limit displacement and collision, and the max acceleration was at 30, all right, and if we start to sim that, you'll see that as soon as I have an impact right there, the pieces are, you know, like responding greatly to that, being like, okay, we are being pushed far away, you know, like we are bouncing away, let's go, it's our time to shine, even though you have like a pop drag that then slow them down. This is not really ice-like. What we want is to limit the displacement on collision, and it's just me. I don't know if it has a huge impact, but I'd like to just reduce the max acceleration. It's allowed to do. Now, if I hit play again, because I cannot do any play blast right now, sorry about that, you can see that now, you know, the ice is much more reluctant to move, you know, like it's like, no, now you really have to push me away if you want me to move away, you know, and that's much greater for the look that we are after, you know, like a boat pushing through the ice. If I zoom into that, you can see that where we have like more stress applied, you know, well, we have more smaller pieces. Where we have less stress applied, we have bigger pieces, which is exactly what we want. So now I think that having done that, this is pretty much the base of the setup. We are now left with artistic direction and how to add a bit more to that, how to add some complexity to this, and that's exactly what we are going to do next.